I believe a lot of people that I work with have the ingredients of seven figures. They don't have the recipe. Going to seven figures is not going to be a matter of motivation. Going to seven figures is not just going to be a matter of more hustle. If it was just more hustle, then anybody who was a hard worker would hit it. Going from six figures to seven figures isn't more offers. It's not more marketing. It's not more ideas. It's not more team members. It's not just more. It's actually about removing and subtracting things that are not moving the needle. We know simplicity scales. But what a lot of people don't talk about is if simplicity scales, can you handle simplicity? One target market, one offer, one sales process, one primary channel, 1 year. Scaling is about subtraction, not addition. Hello and welcome back to Ambitious. Today, we are talking about the thing that I feel like is the number one goal of a lot of people that I work with and a lot of people that I have conversations with, which is I want to make $1 million. How do I do that? I want to make seven figures within my business. Maybe it's within 12 months. Maybe you, kind of like me, just really want to see, can I do it? Can I do seven figures? Can I make that happen? And with that, when we're in this pursuit of trying to achieve seven figures, we oftentimes believe that when we first started our business, we were hustling our butt off. And so we're like, I just have to work really hard to get to seven figures. More work is obviously going to mean more money. But today I'm going to kind of break down why more is actually not the way that you achieve more revenue within your business. And I also want to help in today's episode to break down for you that there are 1,000,001 different ways to get to seven figures. But today I want to share with you the thing that a lot of those people that you may be watching, you might be consuming, you may be inspired by, what a lot of those people in their businesses have in common. And so, we see people on social media that have scaled to seven figures doing passive, or we see people who have scaled with high ticket. They have a mastermind, they have an agency. This person's got a big team, this person has a small team. And so when we see all of these differences, it can sometimes feel hard to say, okay, well, what is the path? What is the way that I achieve seven figures in my business? And today I'm going to break down the 5 things that you actually need to have in your business to scale to $1 million. And this is something I want to give credit where credit is due. This was actually something that is originally sourced, I believe, from Clay Collins, and then was also dove deeper into by Talking More. And so with this, these two incredible entrepreneurs have been the source of really the expansiveness of this framework that I'm going to share. So I want to be very clear. This is not a framework that I came up with, but it is a framework that when I discovered it, I really started to reflect on all the businesses that I've helped. And I've helped many people to go to seven figures into multiple seven figures. And it was really interesting because when I saw this framework and I kind of, dove into it, it made me really start to reflect on all the businesses. And it became very apparent that, all these businesses did have this common through line. I just kind of never had, I guess, a way to be able to showcase exactly what it was as the through line of like these singular buckets, the singular framework. And so for myself, I always focus on principles. I focus on, core beliefs, core perspectives that all seven-figure businesses have. And this framework literally organizes all of those principles into one perfect visual for you. So with that, if you are somebody that right now, is in your business, maybe you're doing about 6 figures right now, and you're like, I'm gunning for 7 figures. I really want to do that. The thing I want you to know is going to 7 figures is not going to be a matter of motivation. Going to 7 figures is not just going to be a matter of more hustle, because truthfully, if it was just more hustle, then anybody who was a hard worker would hit it. It's not also just a matter of talent either, right? Like there's people who are really great at what they do in delivery, or they're really great at what they do in marketing. But if you're missing one of the 5, you're not going to go to 7 figures. And so one of the things that I think is going to be the biggest, I guess I would say, disconnect in your brain of today's framework is the fact that a lot of people believe that when you're growing your business, I need more. So if you're on TikTok, you're like, I need to be on Instagram and I need to be on YouTube. Or maybe you're doing short form. You're like, now I need a podcast. Or I'm helping this person, but I want to also help this person. I have this offer, but I want two more offers behind it. And we add a lot of complexity. We add a lot of bloat. We add a lot of stuff to our business because we believe that, of course, I must need something else because if the thing that was going to get me to seven figures, I already had, why would I not be hitting it? And I would say that, the way to seven figures, if I was going to give you an analogy, I believe a lot of people that I work with have the ingredients of seven figures. They don't have the recipe. And I think that a lot of people go search. You might be searching for ingredients. You're like, there's got to be an ingredient that I'm missing, which is why this is not working. But have you ever asked yourself if maybe it has nothing to do with your ingredients, meaning your offer, the person you're serving, the platform you're on, the algorithm, right? Maybe it has nothing to do with your ingredients. Maybe it has everything to do with how those are all interacting with each other. How is that package coming together? And so, going from six figures to seven figures isn't more offers. It's not more marketing. It's not more ideas. It's not more team members. It's not just more. It's actually about removing and subtracting things that are not moving the needle. And therefore, on the contrast, doubling down on the things that actually are. So, one of the things that I kind of wanted to unpack, because I have helped a lot of people to create seven and multiple seven figure businesses, is what are the mistakes you're going to want to be aware of that you don't make? Because there are some commonalities, if I'm going to be honest. As I said, have helped authors, lawyers. I've helped in-person, naturopath clinics. I have helped coaches, agencies, service providers, you name it. So one of the first mistakes is that people add instead of optimize. And this is kind of what I consider like the jump ship mentality, which is that if you feel like you have revenue that's low, so maybe your cash flow this month is low, you feel like next month or in 2 months, you're like, the cash flow really starts to dip off. The mindset of the person who looks to say, okay, great, more, but not optimize, is you see that your revenue is dipping. You see that you even can forecast that it's about to dip. And you're like, do I need a new offer? I think I need a new offer because this offer is not selling. So I think I'm going to need to get a new offer. Maybe I need to create something different. Maybe my person that I'm serving needs or is looking for something different. If your social media is not doing well, I see this all the time. My TikTok's not doing well. I got to get on Instagram. My Instagram's not doing well. I got to do a podcast. My podcast isn't doing well. I think I'm going to do YouTube, or I think I'm going to do paid ads. There's this jump ship mentality of if the thing that you're doing is not working, what else can we do is kind of the question. And also we see this with sales, because I even had somebody that, their sales were lower and they were struggling with the consistency of sales. And they were like, great, like, how do we switch all of our positioning? And I remember saying like, okay, whoa. We don't necessarily need to go from we're marketing blue to we're marketing red the next day. We need to look at, is there a different shade of blue that is kind of what your ideal client is looking for that maybe we're just not speaking to right now? So the question when, you're looking to build a seven-figure business is not what else can we do, but really how can we make this work better? And it's a really simple reframe, but it is going to be the difference that saves your business, if I'm going to be honest with you. Because what else can we do instantly invites, let's do more, let's do different, let's look elsewhere. How can we do this better? Insinuates that there's something that needs to be optimized that's sitting underneath your nose. And as a result, it leads your next steps to saying, okay, we've got an application, they're booking calls, but they're not converting. What can we adjust in the application? Social media. Let's say you're on Instagram, people are not reaching out through DMs on Instagram. Okay, great. Well, with that, what do we need to look at within the Instagram side to increase the amount of how many people are activated from our Instagram social media content? It's not about saying, okay, great, like we're off to TikTok, we're off to YouTube. And that's something that you want to be really aware of, because we always know, right? The classic line is the question you ask determines the answer that you will be given. And so when we're at seven figures as this, goalpost we're going for, we have to be very conscious of what are the questions that we're asking ourselves. And is it possible that the questions you ask to get the answer you're looking for are kind of part of why you're taking those next steps in the wrong direction? Okay. So one big mistake is adding more stuff before asking to optimize the things that you already have. The second big thing that I see is that people are confusing activity and busyness, and often like that things are chaotic, there's a lot going on, and we're working on a lot of stuff and we're super busy, you're confusing being busy with being in leverageable tasks. Okay. And this is something that I think many of us struggle with, myself included. When we see, we're working on a new marketing, we're working on an email thing, we're working on a sales thing, we're working on a launch, we're working on building out our offers for our clients. We're like, yes, okay, woo, like we're doing this, like we're getting stuff done. You're super busy, but to be honest, it doesn't mean anything about what's actually leverageable. Because when I look at someone's calendar and I say, okay, great, tell me all the stuff that you worked on this week, like show me where your time is going. It's oftentimes that people are really bloated in their calendar and really bloated in their schedule. And you're super busy, but the things that you're working on are not necessarily leverageable. So they're not things that are going to move the needle. And again, this kind of is a little bit similar to the aspect of adding more. When we add more things, we become more busy with those projects. And when we get busy with those projects, we're spending time, and hours and days and sometimes even months in this deep belief that if we work hard, we stay busy, we do more calls, we make more content, we're in more meetings, we're doing launches, you're so busy, but then you look up and you think nothing is moving. And I just had a call with somebody this week, and this was a situation. Same thing. She was like, Kate, I really want to scale. And so she told me all of the stuff that she was, thinking. She's like, I want to do the paid workshops and I want to, do content here, but I also have a podcast, but I have this offer. And then there's offer 2 and 3. And then I have this person in my DMs and I have this person who does sales calls for me. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like there's a lot being juggled here. So I asked a very simple question. What is moving the needle right now? And she was like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, great. Let's go through each of the pieces. So I said to her, the person who's taking calls, sales calls, the calls that they're taking, how many of them are closing? And the person's close rate was very low. So, okay, great. That's something that's not really moving the needle right now for us. We need to tweak that. That was something that needed to be tweaked because it was getting some people, but not nearly the percentage that we should. Okay, great. Second was the person in the DMs. And she said, there's someone who's booking calls for us. I said, great. How many calls has that person booked? And she goes, oh, well, it's been a little bit rough the last couple of months. We haven't booked a lot of calls. So I said, no, I want like tangible data. Like, what has it literally done? What has it produced for you in the last 90 days? And when we went deeper into it, truthfully, the answer when we kind of evaluated everything was that it really wasn't moving the needle. It wasn't a thing that was actually helping the business to grow. And so I want to talk to you about the busyness of that, though, because this team member, and by the way, this is not the team member's fault. This has nothing to do with the team member. This has to do with the fact that the strategy around what it is that the CEO gave is not a strategy that the business needs to focus on. So I said, listen, we're not firing this team member, but what we should be doing is we should be shifting that team member to a department, to a project or an area of the business that really is creating momentum so that we're not bloated and distracted and looking a million different places. And so what I basically had explained to her is, okay, well, what does it look like to deal with this? She goes, well, I have to, outline the strategy. I'm giving feedback on the DM conversations all the time. So again, there's her alone working on the strategy. 2, she's giving feedback to this person. And 3rd, she's like, yeah, I do meetings. I do coaching of them to help them with, the effort in the DMs. And even with all the meetings they've done, the feedback they've done, the refining the strategy they did, this person's not booking people in. So it may be that specific system or pipeline in her business isn't actually necessary. We see this also with people who have, for example, like the desire to have a membership, let's say. And you're like, okay, great, I have this membership and you're so connected to it emotionally. But I say, okay, great. How many people have enrolled into the membership until the last, 30, 60 days? Well, it's been a little bit lower than usual. Okay, great. What is the show up call of the people who are in the membership? Are people showing up? Well, not consistently. Okay, great. So people aren't buying consistently. They're not showing up consistently. How much time is this taking from you? And so they would say, well, I'm marketing it, but nobody's buying, or I'm making these trainings or resources, but people don't show up. And so it's always this, I'm putting time in, there's nothing to show for it. That's a really easy indicator that you are in busy. You're not in really moving the needle in that area. So what I look for into the busy versus leverage is I look to in your business right now, you can ask yourself these questions. What are the things that are producing even a little bit of fruit? Okay. So This was actually something that recently, when I was reading my Bible, one of the lines that comes out, and it doesn't matter, this is just more for me as to how this kind of where the fruit part comes from to give it context. They always say that, being Christian, that you should check for fruit, which basically means, or, like check them or, evaluate them by their fruits, which means that it's not about somebody who tells you that they're one way or shows you that they're one way, or they say it's, working, or they say that they're a good person. Check by their fruits. You will see in the way in which the evidence of their lives present to you that this is evidence that something here is, they say what it is, and it is this way. I took that same principle into business, which is check for the fruit, which is if someone says that they are, a passive selling business, check for the fruits. How many passive sales do we have? If we say, hey, like, yeah, this application funnel, this is the way that we scale. I'm like, awesome. Check for the fruit, which is where is there a example or a producing of evidence that tells me that what you intend to be the way you grow is actually the way you grow. And if I don't see those two correlate, if you tell me one thing and the other side, and you're like, yeah, this is the thing that's definitely like what's going to work for us, and I look into it and there's no actual fruit there, it tells me that there's a disconnect. And that part, either one of two things, has to be optimized or it has to be cut out entirely. And that is the thing that I will say a lot of people don't like about going to seven figures. And you've heard me say this quote before, that scaling is about subtraction, not addition. And this is a quote that I had from one of my mentors. And it was like, again, these quotes, these frameworks are such crystal clear ways to help guide us in our boundaries of growing. And it was something that I hated, even myself. The idea of someone telling me, no, you're not going to serve that audience, or no, you're not going to serve that offer. What was the best reframe is that the most successful business owners are not looking at what they can add, they're looking at what they can take away. And I was, even tuning in and listening to someone who does about, I think it's about 18 million a year. And they were sharing the same sentiment. They said one of the practices that we really lean into is that we always look at what can we take away? What can we remove? What can we take away? Constantly. Because they recognize that if they don't ask those questions, again, back to the question versus the answer you get, if you don't ask the right question of what can we remove, your brain automatically goes into, okay, what's next of what we're going to add? So people don't like the subtraction. And I'm going to be honest, there's parts of your business that you may feel emotionally connected to. We hear this like stereotypical story of entrepreneurs who are like, no, this has to work and this has got to work and this is the thing I want to do. And I want to be honest with you, I've had those moments. I had that moment this past week. There was something that I was evaluating in scaling. And so I called George and I said, this is something that I'm thinking on and that I'm kind of wrestling with. And he said, Kate, like, you literally know what the answer is. And I was like, I know, but I really want to do it. And I really I was really emotionally connected to it. But he grounded me in this principle. He was like, hey, subtraction, not addition. And I'm like, yes. And he's like, follow the fruit, like follow the evidence. If the evidence is not there, we're not doing it. So I'm like, okay. So he's like, take the principles and put them in the business. Evaluate yourself the way you would do a client. So even for me, this is something that I struggle with because I also fall in love with the things that I'm creating or the ideas that I have or the concepts that I'd love to bring to life. But the reality is just because I love it doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that helps build the business. And so the second big mistake is the idea that we are confusing all of the busyness, all of our ideas, all these concepts that are keeping us booked and busy with things that are actually moving the needle. And those two things are not necessarily always the same. The third, which I will say is very common, and you may be falling into this too, you get bored. Okay. Boredom is if you don't have the right frame of mind, it's a scary place for some entrepreneurs to be because when you're like, okay, great, I've got, this offer, it's doing well. I've got this marketing channel, it's doing well. I've got, my lead magnets, like, okay, like I feel good. We got what we need. We got the core things. It can be really easy to be like, okay, what's next? And always feeling like there has to be something in problem solving mode because if not, that I'm bored of this. And sometimes when people are bored in their business because things are, truthfully a simple business that's scaling, there's not a lot of dopamine. And I'm going to be honest, as entrepreneurs, we love a good dopamine spike. And with this, the dopamine spike, when we don't have it, a lot of us chase it. We chase, how do I get that dopamine? How do I, get that feeling back of excitement about, something new and innovation again, the way that I did when I was first starting my business. And so we know simplicity scales, but what a lot of people don't talk about is, if simplicity scales, can you handle simplicity? Can you handle having a business that doesn't have constant dopamine? And that's something that some people don't really know until they get into it and they realize, okay, wow, I'm bored. I need to go do something. So there's a big mistake of, I'm bored, so let's build. I'm bored, so let's build. So going to build $1 million is actually about allowing the things that work, which goes back to leverage, which goes back to not adding more stuff. It's about the constant repetition of making sure that you're doing that consistently. Going to $1 million is basically about the constant reps of the things that actually are leverageable and allowing those to compound over time. So the example or analogy I give to people is, it's like investing into the stock market. If you're going to invest in the stock market on a Tuesday and you're going to take it on a Thursday, you're not going to see anything happen. So the reason that boredom is important for us to manage and to be aware of and to, navigate is because if we don't, what ends up happening is we're like, okay, here is my blueprint. Here's all the stuff that's leverageable. Here's all the things that I have evidence I know are the way that we're going to grow. And you're like, let's do it. And you hit the ground running and you do that for 3 weeks. And you're like, I'm bored. And you go build something else. What you've done is, when you switch what you're putting your focus in, when you switch what you're putting your resources in, where you switch when your attention goes to, when you switch that, what ultimately happens is, I want you to think you're taking your money out of the bank. And then you're like, why is it not growing? You never gave it time to compound. And so boredom and the ability to fall in love with the simple in a scaling business is such a crucial part of your ability to be successful. Because otherwise, if you cannot manage that or navigate that, you will actually be part of why your business is breaking, not the strategy. Okay. So it's like if someone's like, I invest in the stock market, person A and person B, the person A and person B have the same amount of money. The only difference is one person keeps taking it in and out because they're bored and they don't have that dopamine. And one person left it in and let it compound. And boom, now they've got their massive investment portfolio. That is the difference of boredom and not understanding, the difference between innovation and doing things out of truthfully, a pursuit of dopamine, and just because you are bored or you're not feeling activated in a given moment. Okay. So all of this to say, these are the things that are the core things you want to be aware of if you are someone who wants to go to 7 figures. Now you're probably thinking, tell me the blueprint. Okay. Tell me the steps. Tell me the way to get there. Tell me exactly what to do. And this is something that each of these 5 that I'm going to break down for you can actually be dove into like intensively on their own, because truthfully, these are different parts of mastery of a 7-figure business. So I want to again break down this model by Clay Collins and Talkie Moore. This model is basically at a high level, 1 target market, 1 offer, 1 sales process, 1 primary channel, 1 year. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. 1 target audience, so 1 person that you're marketing to, okay? 1 problem. 2, 1 offer that you're offering. 3, 1 sales process, 1 way that you convert them. 4, 1 primary channel in which you are connecting to them or that you're marketing to them. And 5, 1 year. So these are the 5 that are considered to be the 5 ones of getting to $1 million a year in your business. Now you might be thinking, well, I got a lot more than that. I have a lot more than that. I've got TikTok. I've got Instagram. I've got, the low ticket to the mid ticket to the high ticket. I've got, people that are, beginners, but I've got people who are intermediate that I work with. This is my point, is that you might be doing too much. And so as a result, if you do too much, you're always going to feel that you're scattered, and it's probably part of why you're not growing. So what I want to share with you is really a little bit of a breakdown of what each of these are and give you things to think about. So I literally outlined reflection questions for this. So if you are somebody who wants those reflection questions, what I would say is I'm going to read them here. But if you want, I have also put these into a PDF. And this PDF, we have an incredible Ambitious Network, which I'm going to be fully honest. I'm going to take a second here. The Ambitious Network is something that I really wanted to connect with you who listen to the podcast. And I want to be able to answer your questions, and I wanted to be able to connect with you, and I wanted to be able to give you resources. And as part of the Ambitious Network, what we will be doing is for our really rich strategy episodes, for our episodes where we ask these really, powerful reflection questions. We have journal prompts. We have models that will be teaching. With those, sometimes it's a little bit hard to grasp the whole thing when you're listening, right? It can have these aha moments. Maybe you're on a walk, you're working, you're getting ready, but you're like, man, I really want to come back to that. What we've done is that we have taken this episode and we have put this into a PDF, which is literally a list of all the 5 ones and corresponding questions that you can ask yourself to help you to start to get clarity on each one of these buckets. So all you need to do is literally just shoot me a message on Instagram. If you are already in the Ambitious Network, you will see this in the resources after this episode goes live. And if you are someone who's not yet in the Ambitious Network, all you need to do is literally message me the word network on Instagram, and I will literally send you the link to join us. So as a side note, if you're not in there yet, you're going to want these questions, but I'm going to share some of these with you here. Okay, so number 1 is the target market, which basically is that you need to choose a very specific person to help. Okay. This is a specific target market. So even, for example, people will say, oh, I help coaches or I help agencies. The question that would be a follow-up, for example, would be, okay, but what kind of agencies? What stage of coaches? What kind of coaches? Or I have an agency that helps people with their podcast, let's say. Okay, great. Well, are these beginner podcasts, intermediate podcasts? Are they doing this for marketing? Are they doing it for editing? Like, what's kind of the reason or the incentive as to why they're coming to you? We need way more granular detail. So the one target market is not about one big category. I help service providers. I help, this general population. It's about getting really specific. So getting specific on stage, getting specific on ideal traits. It could also be the specific problems that person experiences. So, for me, I really look at, I have these things called the 5 Ps. And so it talks about, in my model, this, breaking down of the person, the problem, the promise, so on and so forth. So getting that clarity of really on a granular level, who is the person we're talking to? And, I will say going too broad can mean that you just add a lot more complication because you're trying to adapt things to all different types of people. If, for example, let's just say you're a fitness coach who helps people with weight loss, then that is, for example, is it women or men that you help with weight loss? Is this about major weight loss? Is it the last 10 pounds? Like, we want to think about what's the specifics. But if you're just like, I help women with fitness or I help women to get in shape, do you add muscle? Do you do this through CrossFit? Do you do it through home workouts? Do you do it through the gym? Is this for beginners? Is this for intermediates? Like, who is it? Like, there's so many questions. You got to get granular. And I think that's kind of part of number 1. Do you have that clarity? So, question for you. If you had to generate $1 million serving one type of client, who would you choose? And a great thing that was passed on to me from my coach is when we kind of go through these exercises was I was at this place where I was like, okay, I want to help 50% of this person and 50% of this person. That was who I had been helping, and it was who I wanted to help. And I remember being like, the data, I'm a real data nerd. So the data basically was 50-50. So I said, great, this is who I want to serve. And I remember him saying, flip a coin. And I was like, because I thought about, I don't want to not serve a specific person. I, again, still myself have resistance to these questions. And so even myself right now, this year, I am in this reflection process of how can I subtract. And so I literally was like, okay. And I remember him saying, something to the effect of like, if your business was the most simple it could be, because that's what I had basically been focusing on. How do I have a simple business that scales? If your business was the simplest it could be, who would you work with? And I was like, I don't know. And he's like, if you flipped a coin, who would you hope it landed on? And I was like, well, okay, fine. So then that's when I really started to realize, okay, yeah, this is the person that I definitely see myself working with long term. So if I had to generate, this for you, if you had to generate $1 million serving one person, who would you choose? Second, where do you already have the most proof with the people that you serve? Where do you already have the most evidence in the people you serve? 3, who converts the fastest and pays the highest? Okay, so who converts out of all the people you've served, who converts consistently and who oftentimes invests the highest? Also, who do you deeply understand at a psychological level? Who's the person that you really know in and out more than anybody? And are you being broad because you believe it's strategic, or are you doing so because you are afraid to exclude certain people from your brand or from your sales? Okay. So that's pillar number 1 of the 5, which is target audience. Number 2, the offer. This is something I had to learn the hard way. I have always been this way since I was a child. I had to taste test things before knowing that I could really make a decision. So I would be the kid at the ice cream shop who's like, I want to try that sample and that sample and that sample. And they're like, oh my God, kid, pick an ice cream, right? I was that person. And I think that that's even, okay, as I said, I'm doing the same practice right now in my own business, which is and I've talked about this in other episodes, I've done the retreats, I've done the dinners, I've done the master classes, I've done the mastermind intensives, I've done, the foundations program that we had. I considered making a course. I didn't. In the end, I've done private mentorship. I've done some team training within that. I've done VIP days. Your girl has taste tested lots. Here's the thing that I will tell you. The core of what has worked for me was one offer, like basically the entire time. So this was something that while I was doing all this stuff, I had to have a very confronting conversation with myself when I was reflecting on this to realize, yes, you did it, but I think I did it out of ego. I did it out of like, okay, well, like I want to basically see and show myself that I can do all these things. And now I have that evidence, but I realized very quickly that's not necessarily, even though I enjoy doing it, it's not something that necessarily moves the needle in our scaling. And so now, because of that awareness, I have to look at, okay, wow, I want to do all this stuff. But the truth is, most of our sales come from blank, which is like this one offer. So it really means that you want to have one core offer that solves one main problem for people. It gets them one core promise and outcome, and it's specific and a defined outcome. And you basically double down on that. You're doubling down the marketing of it. You're doubling down on the selling of it. You're doubling down on the delivery of it. And I see people all the time who have these like 7 or 9 or 12 different offerings. And I think, oh my goodness, like how do you build anything when as soon as you got the walls up for the house you're like, well, never mind that house, let's go to the next house, right? You're not really building anything substantial because you're constantly pivoting your focus, you're constantly pivoting your attention. And so one offer is basically about doubling down on what we consider to be a hero offer or a hero product. Some people also call this your signature offer or your signature product. The signature thing that people come to you for and that they consistently buy from you. And this is something that I really do think if you don't know what that is, we need to figure out what that offer for you is. You may have been too scattered that you just don't know. And 2, if you do know what it is, ask yourself how much you're leaning into it. And for myself, what I found when I reflected on this was that I was kind of so scattered, so busy with all these other things that I'd been doing that I never really poured enough love and TLC into the offer that really was going to be the way in which we scaled. And so fast forward, it basically has allowed, again, the subtraction. Reflection questions for you. If you could only sell and deliver one offer for the next 12 months, which of your offers would it be? Okay, so if you could only sell and deliver one offer for the next 12 months, which of your offers would it be? Which offer do you see actually produces the strongest level of client results? Which offer is easiest for you to sell? Which offer has the cleanest path to delivery and as a result, scalability? So, which is the easiest for you to deliver and to support on? And are you creating new offers because the old one is broken, or is it because you just simply have not refined it yet? Okay. So, this is something that I want to leave you with. You may even, as you're answering those in your head, you're like, oh my God, I know it's offer 2. I know it's offer 4. Like, if you have that inclination, just remember that, anchor onto that. Because if it's that easy for you to recall, I want you to realize, you know the program or the offer or the agency service that you should be doubling down on. If you can answer those questions and it keeps coming up consistently, listen to it because it means that you know what it is. Now, part of your brain right now is like, but I don't want to delete that offer. I don't want to, only serve X. I don't want to subtract. That's more of a mindset piece that I can't quite dive into completely in the way that I would want to today, but we will have a separate episode. I'm going to make a mental note of this where we will dive into the resistance to subtraction. Now, we've got one target market, remember, and now we also have one offer. The third of the 5 ones is one sales process, or what people consider to be one converting mechanism. And so this is really about having a repeatable buyer's journey and how the person goes through your process. So here's the thing. This, I want to be very clear, doesn't need to be sales calls. I don't need you to do sales calls to be, successful. For me, it's sales calls, but you don't have to do sales calls. I also do DM selling. But again, the main way that I scaled to 7 figures was with sales calls. So I now have DM selling and I now have some people who buy via email. Like I have that now, but I didn't when I was going to 7 figures. And so I want you to think about maybe the different ways you're trying to convert people. Some people you send, to a call, then you do a proposal. Some people you're trying to close them in the DMs. Maybe are they ghosting you? You've got people that you're trying to have buy from webinars, but you're like, how many of those people have actually bought from the webinar? So all of those are things that we want to take in consideration. Okay. So you want to lean into that process. My process was the application process because when I came from being a high ticket phone closer, I knew that I knew how to sell on the phone. And so what I did is I tweaked my application, I tweaked my call booking process. I would tweak, my call structure of how I would actually talk to somebody on the phone. I would tweak the emails that I send afterwards about the offer and if someone didn't close on the call, what would be the things that I send afterwards? Each of those were things that I optimized to be able to get to 7 figures. And so it's not about, for me, I didn't really move to DMs, I wouldn't say, until after 7 figures. And that's because I used the call clarity that I had to basically be the thing that guided my DM process. So the questions for you are, can you clearly articulate your buyer's journey? Do you actually know with your current sales process you use, what is your close rate of that process? So if you are converting people in the DMs, how many people that you have conversations with right now have bought in the last 30 days? Or if you have calls, how many people have bought via a phone call with you in the last 30 days? Really ask yourself, where is the evidence again or data that tells us that this, there's a close rate that's connected to this that shows us it's working? Do you actually know right now in your sales process where your prospects or the people that you're connecting with are dropping off? Is your sales process actually documented? So, do you have a clear way to show or demonstrate your conversion process, whether it be through call, DMs, emails, however you want to convert people? And if I hired a sales team for you tomorrow, could they easily plug themselves into your system? Because that insinuates that you do have it documented. It insinuates that obviously we are going to have this be a process that's working. And it really tells us, okay, great. If I have this thing that I'm saying is the sales process that works, could I put somebody in it tomorrow and they would just be as successful as you? Okay. So that is number 3, which is the one sales process. Now, then we have, which people are not going to love, you've got the one primary channel. And I want to be very specific on what I mean by this. Your primary channel. I'm not saying you have one channel, meaning that you can't post anywhere else and you never should be on another platform. I'm saying you need to have a primary channel. And I'm going to tell you an example or a story of exactly what this looked like for me. When I was first starting my business, I remember I was on Instagram as my main platform. And just like many, I was like, okay, this is cooking for us. I want to do something else. And I remember messaging our team member, Kelsey, at the time. And I was like, hey, I really want to do YouTube and I want to repurpose it to a blog and I want to do this connected to an email. And like, she was the best. She was like a good sport. She was like, okay, like, that's a lot, but okay. And I remember her being like, that's a lot at one time. And I, at the time, was okay, like more is more, more is more. And I wanted to go wide. Guess how many months that lasted? Maybe the better question is, guess how many weeks that lasted? I think I filmed in total like 6 YouTube videos. And by the time I was done those 6, I was so exhausted that I was like, no, this is not for me. So I quit. And guess what? I went back to Instagram. And then we're cooking on Instagram. We're doing our thing. We're growing. And Kate's again like, oh, but TikTok's around. I got to go to TikTok. So then I was like, great, 3 TikToks a day. Guess what happened? All of the leads that we were getting were coming from Instagram mainly. So we're like, man, this Instagram thing is really it's really the core of where our momentum is. And so we nixed doing TikToks. And so the thing that I'm clearly in this bucket, a slower learner, there was the evidence to say that these extra things were not what we needed. The evidence of if I had just taken a step back would have shown me quicker that I didn't need to have more and more and more. I didn't need more platforms. I didn't need more stuff. I didn't need to go elsewhere. I needed to double down on Instagram is what I needed to be doing. And so we did that. And so we leaned into, at one point we were posting a reel a day and a carousel a day. We were selling on stories every day and providing value on stories every day. We would go live. Like we were really leaning into Instagram. And that was something that helped us to be able to grow. And so the primary channel is not to say that you can't be on another place, but it's also to make sure that if you're going to go to another platform, you need to make sure that you aren't completely neglecting the initial primary channel that got you success in the first place. Too many people try to go wide with the marketing, and because they believe if I'm seen more places, you hear these things like no one can buy from you if nobody knows you. Well, nobody said that for people to know you, you had to be on all different platforms. You just have to get people to know you. So you can be known by being the top person known on Instagram. That's not necessarily being known means being everywhere. So again, one primary channel. So you want to master, dominate one core marketing channel before you ever move on. And instead, if you don't do that, you'll end up basically surface level on every single place that you market. So things to think about. If you had to bet $1 million on one channel right now that you're using or one platform, which platform would it be? Okay. So if you had to bet $1 million that there's one platform or one channel that was going to be the reason that you grew, what would it be? Where do you already have traction that you can clearly see when it comes to marketing? Where does your ideal client naturally spend their time? Are you switching platforms because you have mastered and you're ready to expand? Or are you switching platforms because your current platform's results are low? And if you actually have to be honest with yourself, have you given the current channel that you're on a true, intense, consistent, unquestionable 12-month commitment? So here's what I would say is an example of that. So if you're on Instagram, what you would want to ask yourself is, are you consistently every week on stories, posting on your feed, answering your comments, chatting with people in DMs, potentially going live, having video content out, static feed content going out, engaging with your audience in things like questions or polls? Are you really leveraging Instagram? And if part of that you're like, I post, then this is your invitation to double down. It's a matter of doubling down on the current place that you already have traction. Okay. Now, that is number 4. So it leads us to the last, which is 1 year of relentless focus. So remember, if we go back to the 5, we've got 1 target audience, we've got 1 offer, we have 1 sales process, the way we convert people, and we have 1 primary channel. And we also need to have 1 year of relentless focus. So what this means is that you're going to focus on those previous 4 for an entire year, for 12 months. For 12 months, you're going to focus on 1 person, 1 offer, 1 sales process, 1 core marketing channel as your dominant place for 12 months. And you're not going to get distracted. You're not going to be like, but I want to do a YouTube channel, but I want to do X. And could you have singularity of focus? Now, here's the thing. I am not a coach who believes in rules, as in the sense of like that you can't do blank. You can only do blank. I just shared stories today of how I was doing the 5 ones, but I was like, oh, this is kind of sexy over here. And then I would go over here and I'm like, this seems a little sexy to me. And I would consider doing all these other things, even though I really, the entire time, the thing that actually grew the business was the 5 ones. And if I'm going to be honest, the way that I was able to do it all is because I was honestly at that point working so much. I literally have videos on my phone of me at my desk working at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was up till 12 midnight working. So I didn't do all this stuff and achieve all of these different things and was scattered because that's what was leverageable. I think I did it because I honestly was working so much that I overworked to be able to make it all happen. Whereas I think now looking back on it, if I had pulled back and really doubled down on the stuff that I was doing during the day and just did that, I probably could have slept a lot more. I could have worked a lot less. I could have had a lot more fun, and I would have probably hit the same goal. So it is something that was the through line of my business. I just didn't have the perspective at the time to be able to see it. So when we think about doing this for 12 months, I know your brain is like, but come on, because I want to do blank. I know. But things to reflect on. Where have you quit too early in the past? What would happen if you removed the option to be able to pivot? What would you fix right now to go to $1 million instead of replace? Okay, what would you fix instead of replace? Where are you chasing novelty or ego versus building an actual asset for yourself? And if you stayed the course for 12 months, for a year, what do you know could compound? The thing that I wanted to do today in breaking down the mistakes as well as the 5 ones of this model is that I want to make sure that you know those people who have 7 figures and multiple 7-figure businesses a year, okay, like cash per year. The people who have those businesses are not necessarily more talented than you. They're not necessarily more intelligent than you, if I'm going to be honest. They're not even necessarily smarter than you. They're people who are relentless about their core needle movers and making sure that those are mega consistent. So if I was to distill down, these 5 ones are basically you asking yourself, what are the 5 needle movers in my business in these buckets? And if you don't know, this is a great place to start. So if you want to hit $1 million a year in your business, if you want to hit 2 million, if you want to hit $3 million a year in your business, the conversation today is more a matter of asking yourself one critical question. What can you subtract in order to make that happen? And I know it's uncomfortable. I know it's probably not something that you want to ask because you love to add. But if you can really take this reflection, this model seriously, I can, with pretty high certainty, guarantee that you're going to see massive momentum toward the millions by doing so. And truthfully, it's going to separate you from your competitors, because while Susie is out there trying to create the offer and the product and the marketing, and she's trying to be everywhere and do everything and create everything, all she's doing is bloating her life, bloating her schedule. She's got decreased focus. She doesn't have singularity on evidence of what's moving the needle. She doesn't know where to compound her energy. She's probably not compounding her energy anywhere because she's so scattered. When you think about how do I, in my industry, get to that top tier, it's not just about working more. I'm not going to lie, getting to build $1 million business, it is hard work, but it doesn't necessarily mean that hard work is connected or equals to complicated. And that's the main thing that I think we're unpacking here is that 7 figures is not about complication. It's actually quite simple or streamlined in its structure. It's just a matter of making sure that you're able to be consistent with it and that you don't overcomplicate it. Remember, simplicity scales. Scaling is about subtraction and not addition. Okay. So I would love for you to, number one, go through these reflection questions. As I said, if you do not, as you were going through today, feel like we were going through them maybe too quickly, maybe you were doing something else while tuning in today, no problem at all. Message me the word network on Instagram and I will add you to our ambitious network. If you are already one of our OG peeps who are in there, love you to pieces and thank you so much for listening. We will have that inside of the resource area for you with these questions as well as the model for reference. And with all that being said, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I love diving into all things scaling businesses. And so with this, if you also have a question that you would love for us to talk about on Ambitious, reminder, we do have a form that sits on our website. There's actually 2 there. There's one if you would like to be featured as a guest. So if you have a very unique perspective, something that you really feel you are known for in your industry, I would love to chat with you and see if you might be a good fit for the show. We don't, to be transparent, take all people who apply, but we do review them to see if you'd be a good fit. And second, we also do have a form that you can fill out to ask questions. We do these really fun episodes called Unfiltered, where we ask you to submit your questions about your life and your business, and we will answer them on the show. I will plant a seed. We have a new segment that is coming to Ambitious, which I'm very excited about. How I would explain it to you is if you are someone who's wanted to be coached by me, kind of like me and you are on Zoom and we're diving into your business, we have a new segment that we are going to be rolling out on Ambitious very, very soon. And so if that is something that you want to do, please be sure to pop your information and your questions into that form inside of our website, because that will also allow you to apply that question to potentially a different format if we want to reach out and to have you on the show. So with that being said, I hope you have an amazing week. I'm filming this right now on the middle of a morning on what is like a really, really busy week, but also with that, an incredible week. And so with this, I hope you have an awesome week. I hope everything starts to go into flow for you today after listening to this. Let this be your fuel in your engine to be like, okay, I'm getting focused. I'm subtracting. I'm doubling down. I'm compounding. Like, let this be the thing that allows you to finally reset and say, okay, let's trim away the stuff that's not working. Let's double down on what is. And I can't wait to see you in the next episode. And as always, stay ambitious.